Imagine a funeral procession unlike any other in human history. The year is 1227. Soldiers are carrying the body of the most powerful man on earth back to his birthplace. This is a man who conquered twice as much land as the Roman Empire at its peak. But this isn't a state funeral. There are no weeping crowds. There are no monuments. According to legend, as this procession moved through the desolate plains of Mongolia, the soldiers had one terrifying order: kill everyone you see. Every traveler, every merchant, every shepherd who happened to cross their path was struck down. Why? To ensure that not a single living soul could report which way the procession went. Once they reached the burial site, some stories say they diverted a river to flow over the grave. Others say they trampled the ground with 1,000 horses until the earth was flat and indistinguishable from the surrounding steppe. They did their job well. To this day, despite our satellites, our ground-penetrating radar, and centuries of searching, the final resting place of Genghis Khan remains one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. But while his body vanished into the earth, the fire he started was just beginning to burn. This is the story of an empire that rose from nothing to cover nearly 24 million square kilometers, only to be stopped by a force that seemed to come from the heavens themselves. To understand the end, we have to go back to the beginning. Before he was the Great Khan, he was just Temujin. Born into a fractured world of warring tribes, he spent nearly 30 years, from 1178 to 1206, doing something that seemed impossible. He didn't just conquer his rivals, he united them. He brought together the Mongol and Turkic tribes, forging alliances and proving himself not just as a warrior, but as an efficient commander who was genuinely loved by his people. In 1206, a massive council proclaimed him Genghis Khan. The name itself is heavy with meaning. It translates to the oceanic or universal ruler of all the Mongols. And universal wasn't just a title, it was the goal. Under his command, the Mongol cavalry swept out of the steppes like a force of nature. They were faster, smarter, and more adaptable than the static armies of the feudal world. In 1215, they took Zhongdu, what you know today as Beijing, shattering the Jin dynasty and expanding the empire into northern China. Just 6 years later, they dismantled the Khwarezmid Empire in modern-day Iran, cracking open the gateway to the Middle East. But in 1227, the man who built this machine finally met the one enemy he couldn't outmaneuver: death. He died at the age of 65. Now, in most empires, the death of a founding conqueror is the moment everything falls apart. Alexander the Great's empire crumbled the moment he died, but the Mongol Empire was different. It was just getting started. Before his death, Genghis had carefully appointed his successor, his son Ögedei. He handed over the keys to a kingdom that was already massive, but Ögedei was about to supercharge it. If you were living in Europe in the 1230s, the rumors coming from the east must have sounded like the apocalypse. Under Ögedei's reign, the Mongols launched a campaign that would redefine the map. Between 1237 and 1242, they swept into Eastern Europe. We aren't just talking about border skirmishes. They conquered Western Russia. They rode into Armenia, Georgia, and Bulgaria. They crushed the armies of Poland and Hungary. At this point, the empire controlled the largest contiguous landmass in history, nearly 24 million square kilometers. That is a number so big it's hard to visualize. Imagine an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the heart of Europe. The terror was absolute. Even the great city of Baghdad, the jewel of the Islamic Golden Age, eventually fell to this relentless advance in 1258, leaving a legacy of destruction that shocked the world. But trees can't grow to the sky forever. Eventually, the Mongols ran out of land and they had to look toward the sea. And that is where our story takes a turn toward the supernatural. Fast forward to the reign of Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson. By 1274, he had done what his grandfather started. He finally conquered the Song dynasty, unifying all of China under the new Yuan dynasty. Kublai sat at the top of a social hierarchy where Mongols were the elite, ruling over millions of subjects. But his ambition wasn't satisfied. He looked east, across the narrow strip of sea, toward the island nation of Japan. In 1274, Kublai Khan launched a massive fleet to conquer Japan. The Japanese samurai were fierce, but they were not used to fighting a force like the Mongols, who used gunpowder bombs and coordinated group tactics. The Japanese were on the ropes, but then the sky turned black. A massive storm rose up from the ocean, smashing the Mongol fleet to pieces. The invasion failed. Kublai Khan, the ruler of the Yuan dynasty, did not take defeat lightly. He spent 7 years preparing a second fleet. In 1281, he launched one of the largest naval invasions in history up to that point. The Japanese fought bravely on the beaches, holding the line for weeks, praying for a miracle. And incredibly, the miracle happened again. A second massive typhoon slammed into the coast. It destroyed the Mongol ships, drowning tens of thousands of sailors and soldiers. The Japanese believed their gods, the kami, had sent the wind to protect them. They called it the Kamikaze, the divine wind. That word, kamikaze, is famous in American history for very different reasons during World War II, but its origin lies here, in the 2 storms that saved Japan from extinction. It wasn't just the weather that stopped them. In the Middle East, the Mongols finally hit a human wall they couldn't break. The Mamluks of Egypt, a warrior caste of slave soldiers, did the unthinkable. In 1260, at the Battle of Ain Jalut, and again in 1303 at the Battle of Marj al-Safar, the Mamluks defeated the Mongol armies. For the first time, the aura of invincibility was shattered. The Mongols were forced to retreat from Syria. The juggernaut had been halted by the wind in the east and the sand in the west. By 1294, after the death of Kublai Khan, the cracks became official. The largest empire the world had ever seen dissolved. It split into 4 separate territories, or khanats: the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Yuan dynasty in China. The Golden Horde would eventually turn to Islam under Uzbek Khan, giving modern-day Uzbekistan its name. The Yuan dynasty would eventually fall to the Ming dynasty in 1368. Piece by piece, the political unity that Genghis Khan had forged melted away. But the mystery we started with, it remains. Genghis Khan is likely buried somewhere in Kentiamag, his birthplace in Mongolia. But his grave is unmarked. There is no pyramid, no mausoleum, no headstone. Just the wind blowing over the grass. Some historians and archaeologists argue that we should use non-invasive technology to find him. They want to solve the puzzle, but many Mongolians believe he should be left alone. They believe that disturbing his rest could trigger a curse. Or perhaps they simply believe that a man who conquered the world deserves the one thing he wanted in death: silence. What do you think? If we had the technology to find Genghis Khan's tomb tomorrow, should we dig it up? Or are some secrets meant to stay buried,